Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Bridges across America starting to look like this. But How are you? Good to see you, buddy.
I'm good. How are you, Andreas?
Welcome to NEUROPA.
Welcome to
Pretty great.
NEUROPA.
So,
And great show you just did with Alien Scientist. Anyone who for any reason hasn't just seen it on your channel, go check it out. Good conversation.
Jeremy Reese, ladies and gentlemen. But also, this is now the Raphael hour. NEUROPA is actually 2 hours, which is pretty cool. So here we're going to go down the list from commency.at until we get to the... Did I go past it already? No, yeah, log. You gotta go to the log right there. And the log will take you to the top, which is to NEUROPA, December 4th. Here is the AI summary for today. Explore conspiracies surrounding power struggles at local to national levels through politics. Investigate control mechanisms implemented by government territories like ancient knowledge systems and forbidden histories that may be suppressed or distorted over time for societal convenience. Yes. Transition team, NEUROPA.
So I like how the AI in this case put it out as if it were like commandments. I deliberately, just let it be that way. And also, chat, kindly let me know exactly if Andreas is lagging out or not, because at some point you were just reading it and then you said government. It took 10 seconds and then government. And I was like, oh well, it's accurate enough for the programming.
Man.
So we'll just have to make
sure
in terms of
you can read it.
reading longer things. Oh, it's fine. I think we got the gist of it. It's okay.
My internet's coming in and out like I was thinking like radio waves on the bayou. I feel like it's just bouncing. Good job. I'm glad you got it. That's a good sign. Someone heard it right. So it just depends on where you are in the world, whether they let you listen to me or not. But the first thing on the list was the hidden history of Budapest.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is just one of those videos. I guess this is. I honestly don't watch my lunch break too much. I guess it's become pretty popular recently. It's just doing these like short form, well edited videos, summarizing some key information. And what I like best here, I'm sure there's a lot right here, but if you go like towards the end, he's showing very simply once again, I guess, articles from Wikipedia regarding certain architects that supposedly built different buildings in Hungary. And it's just, again, one of these cases that if you go through the list, you're wondering if the guy was ever sleeping, or how it's possible that, again, as in so many other of these apparent reset cases or founded cases and cities, too many buildings are officially constructed by the very same guy. And you have this story reoccurring with Budapest just as well. And Budapest, of course, I guess next to Vienna, at least for me, and probably Prague, are some of the most, nicest cities in terms of old world buildings, or what appear to be old world buildings. Again, many of them then get dated to about 1900. Many of the residential buildings, which are still very nice and have high ceilings, high doors, and so on. But then quite many buildings, again, are built between 1850 and 1900 officially. And these are usually the buildings where then you have one architect, crazily enough, building 30 of those in 20 years and things like that. I'm sure you're familiar with these stories. And he would just have another one of those. I mean, here is apparently even going back to his history to like 1200 whatever, which is data I would not ever trust anyways. Oh, this is world population. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
but there,
his
I mean, he's
idea
also
that
going
basically
on
we can show that there wasn't
things.
very many people before the Crusade.
Yeah. But then again, this is not really data I would necessarily try to reference anyways, but it's an interesting case study just to have this basic idea about Budapest, and again, see the recurring pattern mainly, which just gives some more credence to the idea that it may well be that a lot of the history, as we understand, has been plastered on, for lack of a better term. But maybe try go towards the end, because there should be a few screenshots regarding that Hungarian architect he's talking about. Maybe Széchenyi or something. Yeah, there he is.
Somewhere around here, I think.
Yeah, it's on this side. If you just go a few seconds earlier, I guess you should have scrolled up. I didn't like put it on file because I mainly just put it there not to make any great point. Oh, there. Alajos Hausmann. He's the home man, Hausmann. He was the architect for many of these buildings. And also, of course, suspicious that quite a few of those officially then have been destroyed. So I think there's like 6 or 7 of those in that list, which only a few years after they were officially constructed already got demolished, which again begs the question, were they really just recently constructed by this great architect? Or did this architect just get assigned to all of these buildings? And then some were marked for destruction because of whatever they may have contained, whatever symbology, technology, geometry, God knows what. And some others were kept.
Yeah, I mean, well, you look at Budapest and it's insane, but it also seems just as futuristic as it is traditional. Like they've hit a perfect level of architecture. It's just something that's so incredible, and it's just, yeah, look at this. I mean, it's hard not to be impressed by.
Yeah, Budapest is amazing, especially around the Danube. If you're on the Danube River and you can see both sides. So obviously Vienna is close to Budapest, and I've been there quite many times. And I really have to say the city has a really nice vibe, at least for me. And especially, of course, in the inner districts, you have all these nice old world high ceiling buildings with the nice masonry and so on. And it's just, it's just beautiful. And here again, I think this is something that may transcend even any culture, just this idea that, again, perceiving symmetry, maybe it's also because of some of the composition of the stones and so on, but it just gives you like an elevated feeling, And I'm not saying that this means that whatever society or ideology built that is the most supreme of them all, but at the least it shows, how should I say, I think it's always nice, going on a walk in an old city center or something, you simply get a different vibe. And I think there's good reasons for why that is. As I mentioned, in terms of just the symmetry and like the beauty of it, very different from CIA brutalist enforced architecture. Yeah, here we have more Gladio. So now I'm always bringing it up, but actually, I think I'm already done with the series. So there's a lot of great information there. I'll have to see which one is this World Wildlife Fund. Yeah, this is one of these great examples. Anyone who's into like conspiracies already knows that something's up with the World Wildlife Fund, but it's great to see her like really go through it in detail and show, what kind of shenanigans they're doing, elephants getting killed by landmines and God knows what else. And I think it's just important to anyone, especially who doesn't know about it yet, take a good look at it, because that's like one of the prime forefront pseudo-ecological, pseudo-animal protection organizations that actually seem to serve very different purposes. Where once again, the understandable public interest in, let's say, animal preservation or whatever is most likely being misguided and funneled into things which those that are supporting it, believing it's to protect animals, it may actually be for different ends. There's a series on Africa. There's a great
Martin
image.
and I recently went.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, my ping is so bad. I'm sorry. Martin and I recently went to the Dresden, Germany Military Museum of Germany, and there was a lot of great things there, including I got to touch a V2 rocket, but also there were all of these animals. Man, my internet's so bad. Going back to a hawk, and then a bear, and then wolves, and into space gorillas, right? Like into chimpanzees. I mean, not gorillas. Secret agents were there as well. So like little animals like cats and squirrels, and I give up. I can't tell if you can hear me or not. I'm sorry.
I can. I just need to know. So you mentioned all these animals now, cats and squirrels and so on, and they were in the military museum or around the museum, or where were the animals?
inside the museum, and there was a long line of animals walking from the beginning of the timeline of using animals in military, going back to the Dark Ages, right, as you say, all the way into the 21st century. And it was fascinating, for sure. On to Africa.
When did the horses show up on that
Oh,
timeline?
man. Because the 19th century is when I think horses peaked. Granted, it depends on what you mean by that, because horses were wearing incredible armor in the 15th century and even in the 12th century. I would say even in the 12th century. But in the 19th century, we had gas masks for horses. You know, you had rubber gloves for horses. You had full body rubber suits for horses, equivalent to what we have for astronauts, because they were so concerned about mustard gas and see what horses would wear. I mean, have you seen it? It's crazy.
I have not seen that actually. No.
Hold on, let me show you. At very least, here's like an example. Come on, internet. You see, this is the gas mask itself. So they wear this, and then there's an entire zipper bodysuit that the horse wears to its feet, and then its feet are in these giant rubber gloves, so that the entire horse could be safe in case there's mustard gas. Is the big reason in World War I. So
Wow. That's insane.
that might be to me, in a weird way, that was kind of peak. But okay, you were bringing up Gladio with Africa, which is interesting because of Germany and the Afrikaners and all of the Italian fascists, who Germany actually went to war against the Italian Mussolini fascists in Africa, supporting Ethiopia, right?
Really?
But what was it that they talk about here? Yeah. No one seems to talk about that. But Germany supported Ethiopia against Mussolini. Enemies to friends. Let me see if I can find a thing on that. Yeah, when they became allies was after already having the war. From enemies to allies, I think you could check out some things about this. But they were originally critiquing each other, and eventually it ended, I think, with the culmination of Italian fascism and realizing that they weren't going to be able to support themselves. Italy wasn't going to be able to endure the 20th century, so Germany could usurp it. So it made sense to at least vein alliance. But before that, Germany had directly sponsored enemies of Italy. And because Italy was in the process of invading Ethiopia, the Germans support, and this is a big reason why you see like Africans in SS outfits, right? When you see some of those pictures. But
I see. Yes, that's definitely something that's not generally taught in basic history class.
sorry, my thing just spun out. I don't know if I can repeat yourself. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm just saying that's one of those things I certainly don't teach you in generic history class. So what's interesting here is in her view, so the colonel's view, apparently many of these, let's say, issues that African governments had may have been to a large extent simply because they were completely subdued and controlled by some operation directly or indirectly attached to what she refers to as Operation Gladio, which of course is highly interesting because you have many of these tropes then coming up with, oh, the African people don't know how to manage themselves or they don't care enough and all of these things. But then, of course, when you put this into perspective and consider how much wealth and power potentially has flown into these locales, only to exploit resources or whatever else. I mean, you have Africast regularly to get some direct insight from one of those places. It puts everything into a different perspective, and I guess it can also help to alleviate any type of misguided preconceived notions or something about whoever types of administrative intelligence or however else you would want to call it, managerial ability, because even if your country is full of geniuses, it will be hard to run it if you have a economic and military superpower having special interests in your country that would be at odds with any type of, you know, self-directed administration or government, which I guess actually, of course, is the case in pretty much all countries. But maybe with Africa, it's even a particular case because, you know, it's often used, especially for, I guess, the average American or European, or maybe even Asian, who has a clue about what really happens in Africa, unless you're watching Africast, right? So yeah, this guy also comes up somewhere along the lines. I really don't know enough about it. The only thing for some reason, right, but this was only my connection, was that isn't there like a famous Harriet Tubman? Maybe, I guess they are, of course, officially not related at all, but that's kind of what I was thinking of. And I only know
also,
of her
there's
because of this Trevor Scott video about My Computer Became Self-Aware, where he's showing her, and that's the only reason why I even know her. But anyways, I thought that was an interesting name.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are the names in the Bible of the three men thrown into the fiery furnace by Nebuchadnezzar II. In Hebrew, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? Which I think is Hebrew names. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are their Babylonian names, right? They're Indo-Iranian names, right? That they were given. And so they refuse to prostrate themselves in front of King Nebuchadnezzar or his statue. They're thrown into the fiery furnace. A apparition of a fourth person who's brighter than the flames itself protects them, which is sort of an angel, but also an anthropic angel. And they leave the furnace, which is interestingly in the shape of a bell, right? Right. That's a major part of their furnace. Supernatural thing as well. So I find that interesting that his name would be, or was it Shadrach? That's interesting.
Oh, really? Yeah. But can you briefly explain that biblical story in like layman's terms, or what you would say the main symbolic
or I thought I did.
point of it is? Well, maybe you did, and maybe I'm just too slow.
So I guess the point of the story is that the idea of the Jewish exodus out of Israel, forced to be slaves, slave names like Hananiah, which is the name of Shadrach, and his mother calls him that, right? His slave master calls him Shadrach, right? That's the Babylonian name. I don't know if that's the most important reason that it's connected, but it seems interesting that would be his name. And yeah, so they refuse to bow before the statue because they continue to keep their Jewish religious practices, which are unusual. Wait, so because most people
so one
will
thing
bow
is they refuse idolatry in this understanding, or because what statue should they
in general to? Yeah, so because idolatry
Oh no, Andreas, it's important what you're saying, but at least on my end you're getting stuck. Chat, kindly let me know how stuck Andreas is on your end right now. I'll see.
Is part of any better
part
yet?
Of,
okay.
Yes.
They
maybe you're back now, Andreas. Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry, I was trying so bad. They refuse to break one of their many laws. So this is the first people that, as a slave culture, will continue to keep their own religion and their own culture. This is unheard of. Normally, you become a slave, you start worshiping your master's god. The master's like, what are you doing? I'm going to burn you at the stake in front of everybody, all three of you. It does not work. You know? And then the god of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego ends up impressing Nebuchadnezzar, who is never exactly a great Babylonian king. I mean, he's a great Babylonian king, but he's never fully become, he can't become, he's always a Gentile. He's never fully becomes Jewish or something, but he's greatly impressed by Judaism. As much as Judaism, as much as Persian and Babylonian culture influences the Jews, maybe more so, Judaism influences Babylon, right? Because he says these are reliable people, their religion is reliable, their occult practices, their magic is reliable, their astronomy is reliable, and so they end up being very well placed. How well placed? Well, they marry them into the Chaldeans. Who are the Chaldeans? They're the most valued sorcerers and astronomers of Babylon. So that's, you know, that's to some extent they become normalized in Babylon. Again, all because of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which would maybe make sense that you have the Underground Railroad, Tubman name, and Shadrach name. I don't really know about Vakanot, but that seems kind of interesting too. Erat. Vaka Erat. Vakan Arat. I don't know what that name would mean. I don't know. Maybe it's like a traditional name. But yeah, also involved with Liberia, and Liberia was, you know, kind of a love of
once
Afro.
again gained independence in 1847 in the time of the official Republican revolutions all over the world.
Yeah. Right after the assassination of JFK during the time of James Polk. Totally. Right. The true Whig Party. The Liberian Whig Party. Because there were dark-skinned Amero-Liberian, and these are super wealthy, conservative blacks that were maybe, I mean, as British as anyone else, really. They fully British. And they built a British state for that purpose.
Yes. So this is something I still have look into. I believe also Chase sent this to me. Thank you. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if everything we know about this particular thing is wrong. There's even the open question, which I would open up by now, which of course would be incredibly contentious. To what extent the whole JFK thing, how should I say? Well, definitely it became a psychological operation. The question is, from which point was it that, and what was really involved there? I guess the Lincoln assassination, from what I understand, the importance of Lincoln, even though I don't know so much about American history, would be incredibly important. So here I would even again ask the question, what really happened? Then we have one variant that I guess most people would know that have an American education. And then we have also this variant, which would apparently tell you that it's wrong. I'll still have to take the proper time to listen to this particular podcast. But yeah, again, I wouldn't be surprised if also here you have many differing views. And the next link connects to that, which is called, and this is how it connects also to the stuff I think you like talking about. The next one is an Amazon link about a secret constitution and basically the role of Lincoln, even in official history apparently, in shaping and defining America's democracy. And also from what I understand, this is very much related to the whole idea of the I want to say American slave wars, but officially called Civil War. Andreas likes to call it the War of Northern Aggression. if I have my timeline somewhat correct right now. Yeah, that also this figure is greatly misunderstood. All that I can recall now, I hope I'm not saying anything wrong now, is that there's basically the view or the contentious point as to what was Lincoln's perspective and role in slavery exactly. And I can't recount the exact details here, but I think that is the main contentious point here.
Are we good?
What do you say,
Okay,
Andreas?
so he said that cutting slavery out of the United States would be like removing a cancer, like a tumor, that would be such a large thing, part of the body to remove that it would kill the host, right? That was his excuse, which makes sense because, his wife's slave plantation, his wife's family's major investment in slavery, and their connection to Rothschilds and to large banking families. So he was married into, the right people, that it would not be an acceptable thing to be against slavery. But it was a big topic. 15 years earlier, with his top hat, Joseph Smith had run on the campaign of abolition of slavery. And so it was a major reason why Abraham Lincoln wore a top hat, was to associate himself with Joseph Smith, but also with Joseph Smith's abolitionist cause. So he was trying to make himself look like somehow related to the Mormons in a weird way, right? At least in the way the Mormons had been before.
The most superficial level of, how do you call it? Cover up or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely ridiculous.
Relabeling, feigning a false flag, false hat.
But you also had the Jacksonian Democrats at the time who were pretty well associated with the assassination of Joseph Smith. And you have the James Polk Jacksonian Democrats leading into what becomes the anti-Mason party, which is a party that was created out of the hysteria of conspiracies about missing Freemasons, particularly William Morgan. And this party eventually becomes so powerful that it combines with a less relevant but originally more powerful party, the Whig Party, which is, again, what offshoot led to the Africanized Whig Party in Liberia. So, and the Whig Party was what George Washington was part of. And a lot of these guys who wore wigs, right? So the Whig Party became, with the anti-Mason Party, the Republican Party. And their first platform, their first politician was Abraham Lincoln that they ran. And it was in the hopes of taking these two smaller parties together, they could have something that usurped the Jacksonian Democrats. And it worked. But isn't it kind of the same thing? And a lot of people would say maybe there was something kind of unique about Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. I don't think of him as an effectual or intelligent person per se, although he was compared to a lot of people, I suppose. Because a lot of people are pretty stupid. He was comparably more intelligent than some people. Like Bill Clinton maybe level intelligent. Bill Clinton's not stupid. He's very good at doing crossword puzzles. So
yeah,
you can imagine Abraham Lincoln. His main difference was he was. Yeah, I mean, when I think of Bill Clinton, I think of his William Cecil connections, his Cecil Rhodes scholarship through Quigley connections, and mostly I just see him doing crossword because I know I've seen him in the past. I remember this. Him being asked questions in between, he's working on a crossword puzzle, usually like the Saturday one, which is the hardest one, and getting all the answers pretty well because he was pretty good at that. That's his sort of Jerry Seinfeld level of intelligence. But that's not really what I mean. The reason I bring it up, or not, it is what I mean, but it's not what's important. What's important is the Pinkerton connection, which again, we talked about the FBI earlier too, and this is totally tied in. JFK assassination, Lincoln assassination. Lincoln originally was afraid he was going to be assassinated way before he was, like 1861. And it was by the Pinkerton detectives that he was protected. At least he thought so. And the Pinkerton detectives are the group that eventually became the FBI. It was a private detective organization with the logo of an all-seeing eye with the words "We never sleep," I think is the Pinkerton. Let's see if I can find that. Here you go. Detective. Yeah. Pinkerton's National Detective Agency. We never sleep. You see, with the eye right here. And there were Pinkertons all over in the country, the United States, but indeed the world. There were Pinkertons in Bavaria. There were Pinkertons in Austria-Hungary. There were Pinkertons in Argentina, right? There were Pinkertons everywhere. And today there still are Pinkertons in Scandinavia. The Pinkerton Agency, I believe, is owned by BlackRock or something like that.
Securitas AB, it says here, a Swedish security company.
Let me see here.
At the end
I'll
of
go
the
back
paragraph,
exactly.
Securitas
Yeah.
AB.
Yeah. So, but there's also some interesting ties with Securitas. If you look at Securitas, they're tied to BlackRock or to,
of course.
Vangel. They're tied to Vangelnut, is the other private police firm. But if you go to YouTube and you type in Securitas AB Pinkerton, you can find commercials that they actually make for Pinkertons that show you like how Securitas makes some commercials for it about their uniforms and everything like that. So yeah, it's a still existing organization. However, that's interesting because basically most of the Pinkertons were immediately, if they were any good, were immediately hired into the FBI. The FBI was created out of the Pinkertons, by the Pinkertons, for the Pinkertons, and it was originally an anti-mafioso organization that was working against organized crime, but that's such a complicated thing to say. It started out that the Pinkertons were working for their biggest contract were for the train companies, Union Pacific Railroad, companies like that. So directly working for Carnegie, Mellon, Vanguard, Vanaver, I mean, and who else is that? Stanford, right? Stanford. And allegedly Pinkertons were working to shut down Butch Cassidy and Sundance. However, that also looks like that could be another level of disinfo, that Butch Cassidy and Sundance were actually working together with the Pinkertons or with the United States government in order to figure out which detectives could be trustworthy or not trustworthy. And so from the Freemasons into the Pinkertons for the FBI, and then the Sicilian Mafia, because the Sicilian Mafia becomes the American-Italian mob, which is swallowed up by the FBI more than by the CIA. The CIA allows for them to coexist in other places, but that's the Connecticut Protestants. Wow, that was funny. I almost slipped on that one. And the Connecticut Protestants, the WASPs, as we say, they were not super interested in the Sicilian Catholic organizations that running Chicago, running Florida, running big parts of America. So they had to kind of compromise. And that's when the FBI starts to lose a lot of their power, is in the 1950s as the CIA is coming out of the OSS and out of Operation Gladio and things like that, having so much more power over no longer just banana republics where they had all their money, but Switzerland, Europe, right? Taking over full cities.
It makes sense.
And that was kind of the end of their...
Even just in terms of official legal jurisdiction, the FBI would be U.S. domestic, right? And the CIA would be U.S. foreign. Is that correct?
Isn't supposed to be just one or the other. So the FBI is supposed to be caring about citizens, investigating for citizens, right? And there's a difference between investigating and intelligence, right? So centralized intelligence is designed to know all things, and it would be essential for centralized intelligence to know about things outside of the self. The United States as a self and outside of the South. And it only exists because of the OSS. The only reason it happened, because I think Hoover wanted the FBI to become the CIA. He thought, well, we should know everything about the world. We'll just take over. Bell, we'll control all of the technology for trains and for telephones. And then from there, we'll know everything about everyone.
And the post office.
And the government was like, not so fast. You're too weird for us. So they put instead this new agency together, a de facto agency out of the remnants of the OSS. Because the OSS wasn't going to be as essential the same way anymore. Because there wasn't going to be a combative war, but we could constantly say, well, we need to know what's going on in every country because anytime another threat like this could happen, so we'll have to continue maintaining, that's all it is, maintaining our offices, maintaining our control over banana republics, maintaining our stakes in these military industrial complex corporations that we've created. Because that's another part of it, is that during World War II, the United States demanded American free enterprise and independent entrepreneurs to work for them. And if you made vacuum cleaners, you're going to be making bombs. If you made carpets, you're going to be making guns.
Is it any different today? Some people call it alphabet soup agencies. Other people call it Alphabet Incorporated. How many startups have they bought up in the last 30 years?
Well, all the good ones. So, short answer.
So what do you say about this comment is maybe something fun to probably confirm, because I had heard about the story, but I didn't know they were Pinkerton detectives. That I heard that there was this Magic the Gathering channel with maybe, I don't know, less than 5K subscribers or something. And for some reason, somehow, through some accident, got hold of a potentially limited edition cards or yet unreleased cards for some reason. And then he really, pretty soon after, had detectives on his door. And supposedly, I didn't know that they could have been Pinkertons, but that's, of course, curious to say the least. Because also Magic the Gathering,
they were Pinkertons.
It's not like just any company, you know?
No, yeah. Well, you got to think about it from another number of levels, right? So what was the name of the major Bitcoin exchange that everything was destroyed and that Bitcoin fell to less than $1? Yeah, what do you think Mt. Gox stands for? Magic the Gathering online exchange.
Oh my God.
That's what it means. Mt. Gox, Magic the Gathering online exchange.
Just now I saw a Bitcoin transaction which were transferring the worth, I think 5 billion worth, and it was like 2,000 or 20,000 Bitcoin were just transferred like recently, apparently, from the wallet that is supposed to be the confiscated funds of the Mt. Gox sting or whatever, or takedown. Maybe there is news on this. I just saw it on some random television channel, you know, it could be fake news. But wait, I'll briefly look it up. Mt. Gox moves
Bitcoin recovers.
2.7 billion. Mt. Gox moves 2.7 billion in Bitcoin to new wallet address. One of Mt. Gox's cold wallets just transferred more than, oh my God, more than 47,000 Bitcoin. We'll have to check how many they are exactly, but this could be another coding. 47 is the Surah Muhammad in the Quran. To an unknown wallet address amid a plan to begin repaying its creditors. The collapsed Japanese crypto exchange Mt. Gox transferred 47,229 Bitcoin.
Jeez,
worth
dude.
2.71 billion at current prices to a new wallet address in its major transactions since May. Transferred from cold storage as a scheduled plan to repay creditors in July. A total of 8.5 billion worth of Bitcoin is slated to be paid back to creditors. Okay, and then there's more transactions. Okay, so apparently this is like a controlled operation, because I thought maybe, it's the confiscated funds, But it's curious that they talk about Mount Gox as if the entity still exists. I thought they were like dissolved or something, but I didn't really follow it, to be perfectly
Yeah, I
honest
mean,
with you.
that's crazy. So, I mean, that Mount Gox
So I'm
still
just
exists at
sharing the
all.
article briefly.
Oh,
Yeah, I just posted it in private chat, so
sure.
you just can briefly pull it up so
Where?
people can see what I was reading
Screen present.
from.
You have better internet than I do.
Oh, sure. Just a second.
Hold on, here's Mount Gox moves 2.7 billion to new wallet address, 47,000 Bitcoin. Sweet.
Right, so okay, I'll zoom in a little bit. Let's see.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like to imagine a future where the CIA or NSA hybrid Hydra has been sitting on the fact that they invented Bitcoin, you know, until like one Bitcoin's worth like $100 million or something, and then they can start selling Satoshi Stash at like 110,000 to clear the national debt. See, that would be the cool thing, because like then they could cement themselves in history as like the greatest deep state agency ever known to mankind. See, happy endings.
You mean the CIA as the creator of Bitcoin?
Well, who the hell else do you think did it? Probably the NSA.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. I don't really completely like to put it like that much
well,
hope
from
in
the
hands of
A1 Japanese knowledge that I have,
Connecticut
Satoshi
boys.
Nakamoto actually may well mean intelligence in the middle. So
Yeah, I mean, I think Satoshi Nakamoto means Samsung, Toshiba, Nakamichi, Motorola. Like it has to do with scaling of Moore's law,
right.
and that Moore's law is the end of the encryption process because you hit quantum computation. So whoever has the most money are the people that game the system right now as it's ending, or people that emerge at the other side. But the best are the people that at that point can just completely write contracts and break contracts. Yeah, Elon Musk does want to buy Magic the Gathering. No, it's not a coincidence. I totally agree with you, old world Micmac, for sure.
And
For
the
sure.
relation here is because Wizards of the Coast, I mean, they own every somewhat interesting fantasy thing. They also have Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because that was the thing
Yeah,
first that they
that's
said, oh, Elon Musk wants to buy Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, even just saying the sentence in itself sounds kind of interesting. But what do you think is going on there? Like what, except the idea of being able to basically control all relevant
have you ever
pop culture?
have you ever met a spook that doesn't LARP? You know? It's just they love these
Good
games.
point.
It's just it is what it is. So also, yeah, the name Wizards of the Coasts. It's like which coast are you thinking about? But it's not just
East
the West
Coast,
Coast.
West
It's also
Coast.
yeah, yeah.
And Arctic
It's
Coast.
like you get where we're going. There's a specific message that they're trying to get you across with that with the coast. I like it. I like that. I always thought it was weird. I always remember at the beginning being like, I don't know if I want to trade my coin on a site that's, you know, named after Magic the Gathering, and friends of mine being like, no, bro, think about it. Like that's exactly where you want to be trading your coin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
all where
cool.
the magic
Also,
was
like
gathering,
the
I'm
whole
sure,
thing
right?
about like being obsessed with anime and being obsessed with Japanese propaganda, mind control culture, like the very much so, right? It's totally the Weibo culture. It's so good. It's so in your face. Pinkertons and magic right in your face. Okay, good. We're good. We're good on that. Let's go to the Protestant Guidebook. Really? Okay. The Protestant Guidebook, reigniting Luther's legacy. Which one?
So I will
Anti-Semitism? Just kidding.
feature
What about Luther?
There will be a few more videos of this guy. Will feature this particular one. I still have to watch myself to properly.
You had me at Brzezinski. I just gotta say,
to properly be able
Brzezinski
to discern what he's saying here exactly and how he's portraying Luther, because also Luther, in my mind, of course, is a historical individual too far removed from present day to be exactly sure. There's, I guess, even without being able to recount them properly, I think there's at least 3 parallel perspectives on who or what the Protestants actually are and what Luther actually did or did not do. But anyways, this is interesting, and the guy is very interesting. Maybe just pull up the next video, because what this Mr. ETV is doing, he's done this series on the first on on the first wives. I think you skipped over something. Let's see, oh no, we're gonna bring him up later again. Okay, so he's just gonna come back a little bit later. Then you'll see why he's so interesting. The guy who's also doing this interview. Next thing here is we have the development of state emblems, technically, which maybe you switched to. All right, yeah. So this is just something I found completely randomly. I was like, oh, is anyone interested in heraldry? Maybe wants to check this out. I think it even features some pictures, which can be nice to look at. But other than that, there's nothing too great I can say about it. I was just doing some research on heraldry and thought that may be interesting to share. Because, of course, usually these emblems, at least in official history, always embody some aspect of the local culture or something like that. For example, a port could have a fish or an anchor or stuff like this. I think it's always interesting to learn a little bit about the history, or even just to learn about symbology, right? Because that's being used in all types of logos and also in symbolism, both overt and occult. The next thing, the Reset talk I did on Ironwork channel, because he did a show talking about star forts, and I was listening to for 20 minutes, and I was like, oh, dude, it's cool that you're researching this, but you have to know about 13th Monkey, right? So then I went on there and basically showed him an interview that I did with 13th Monkey, also, of course, referring to your channel and his other work. To basically give him a head start, because there's, as you know, I think 13th Monkey documented over 16,000 star forts right now. And it's, of course, a great head start to know how many really exist. What was also quite interesting is towards the end of that particular talk, Frank Monday came on, who is living in China, which is, of course, quite interesting since quite some time. And for some reason, he started talking about the so-called immortals, where they say that certain priests or monks have the ability to turn their organs into stone or into crystals, basically. Yeah. And then, of course, I had to tell him about Stellium 7's work on Mount Go. So not Mount Gox, but Mount Go in Spain.
Too good.
Where he found the giant elephant and the heart stones. So that's quite interesting that there is these connections there. So even though, of course, I would say again, any story needs to be verified and so on, but to have these type of parallels is very interesting. If anyone even has the idea that a human could willfully turn his organs into stone, well then, why shouldn't a big elephant be able to turn his organs into crystals as well, right? Or whatever it is. Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, kidney stones, of course. That's what everyone wants to know, which, but even Stellium 7 has some speculations on this, actually, because Stellium 7 in his videos is showing, I think, both kidney stones and then certain, like, in German you call it Agat, I think, AGAT. Some is one of a like semi-precious stone. So there actually are, I believe, some correlations between what we find in organic material and what we find in crystallized stones, where it may well seem as if they could correlate. So this is a possibility, dear user UE4HE3LI8B.
Great name, by the way.
Yes. So here, this section I only brought up. And after this, actually remind me to go to the top of the page so I read the quote I put there. But this I simply put up because Western Sahara is one of these places, whenever I was researching government or something, is one of these very strange administrative regions which does not really have a government. By the way, if you ever want a fun activity, look up the most obscure small country, but I mean either local governments, of course, like small municipalities, or even states, like sometimes in Africa and so on, and look at their websites. Sometimes this can be incredibly interesting and feel like you take a trip back to the 90s or something. And quite a few times I actually deliberately did that on some, like obscure African government site, not even sure how many people would be using it, just even to check if all the hyperlinks are active and so on. And then sometimes I'm wondering, why not at least on that level, everyone could afford, whatever, to have one good IT design agency for their country or whatever. But I guess not everyone is important enough, like the US and some, big major league players, to even have a fully functioning and modern website, right? So anyways, that's just an aside. This is a very strange story with Western Sahara. Maybe I can't say if there is any real parallels, but kind of reminded me of Palestine in terms of like a refugee situation that seems to have been made permanent. I really have no clue about this. I'm only bringing it up because I think it's a very interesting and strange, obscure case, which may warrant further investigation. Also, I think it's never in the news. It's close by to Morocco. Their government is basically moved to refugee camps. And it's another one of these examples where the United Nations is whatever they're doing there for like decades, but there is still no resolution to what's happening. People are still living in refugee camps decades later. Maybe that's why it reminded me of Palestine. That's one, although it is even refugee, well, we can argue about that. But I heard of even other cases, I'm not sure, maybe with Syria or others, where it's just this refugee situation is deliberately made permanent, supported in very strange ways. And instead of assisting people, to reclaim their sovereignty and land, of course, because someone else has the interest of kicking them out and getting the resources, obfuscate the history or whatever else, create conflict. And that's how these very strange situations then become permanent, where in this case of Western Sahara, you have a government in exile, I guess, from what I understand, mainly. Although by now, what I read up, they also recently founded a university. So God knows. But anyways, I think this small level administrative or low budget administrative, but official administrative units are quite interesting to look at.
You know what we need? We need YouTubers to be allowed to YouTube from jail cells. I think that's the future, right? As long as you can YouTube from right inside your cell, then I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm scared. Okay, United Nations mission for referendum in Western Sahara, though. You also brought up that the United Nations wants to play into this.
No, just to add it on, that whatever they're doing there exactly, but how is it possible? It's the great United Nations. They're there, CC formation, 24th of April, 1991. And great, this is how you can prove your usefulness, by making sure that whatever conflict or issue you're having exists for decades. I'd love to know how much money they spent on this and what the real background reason is. I didn't do how should I say, conspiracy type research to discover all the background players or whatever resources there are. I just found it's a very curious notion. And as I said, I stumbled across Western Sahara quite a few times already. So there's something there, I'm sure. If I know more, I'll come back. Or if anyone knows, what's going on there, let us know.
Well, I mean, obviously, Jimmy Corsetti, bright insight, has been harping, no pun, on Mauritania for the eye of the Mauritanian Atlantis, Stargate, sort of Atlantis ruins, right? Eye of the Sahara, the Ricat structure. This is
okay. So there could be old world archaeology in Western Sahara on that geography,
to say the least. To say the very least. To say a little bit more would be to say that people suggest the origin point of civilization and Atlantis itself, right? That Atlantis not just being a bunch of star forts all over the world, but one specific, unique origin point or a breakaway civilization in the past from the future. I mean, there's been a lot of stories about what Atlantis is. That's supposed to be uniquely Sahara at this point here that there's satellite imagery of. That's this perfect 22-mile with multiple rings in the same distance between them as is described by Herodotus when he talks about this spherical city that's surrounded by water, essentially, that is destroyed. So a lot of people have suggested that. It's particularly famous is Jimmy Corsetti for. Here's another sat photo of it. There you go. So this is right, I think, in the zone. Let me go back to that there. Hold on. Wow. The ribbon bar for the United Nations military flags are very interesting. Codes. That's interesting. Well, hold on. There's like 51 of these. But yeah, okay. So Western Sahara, Mauritania, and it's like, I think the structure, let's go back here. Maps.
So just briefly, while you're pulling this up, so
There you
Keenan asked what the band was that played in Chappie, and you gave the great answer, which
Die
says
Antwerp.
the Antwerp, but it's the Antwort, unless there's another Mandela effect, but it's the Antwoord. So it's written somewhat differently, but I thought it was autocorrect maybe.
Then am I right?
If that's
is that right? What?
No.
The Ant word? It is the Ant word.
It's like
Why?
Antwort.
Why do I
Yeah.
remember it being the Antwerp?
Well, I just
Yeah.
know it because Antwort is a German word,
Okay.
so it's very
All right.
similar to
Yeah,
the
my
German
bad.
word. That's how I remember it. No, I'm just finding it. I found it's funny.
Now I gotta wonder what I'm thinking about. Yeah, for sure. Get my mind out of the Antwerp. Dude. Let's go visit
It's
the
all
Antwerp,
connected
though.
somehow, I'm pretty sure.
This seems slightly
Okay,
better
but
than
thanks
the Antwerp
for
to
pointing
me,
that out with the
actually.
Western Sahara. I mean, someone also pointed out, yeah, this District 9 and
So here you
Chappie,
see the Western structure. It's slightly east
always
of it.
these Mad Max environments. All right, I see.
Dude, I love
Okay.
Chappie. I was a fan of that movie. Okay, and then you bring up the Sahrawi refugee camp. Is that how you say that? Sahrawi?
Yes, this is apparently the place where many or most of the former population of Western Sahara is now living, or maybe that's how kind of they want to urbanize the tribes, which otherwise would be more nomadic. I don't exactly understand it, and I won't claim to, and I haven't researched it deeply enough. Again, I just wanted to point that out, that it's a very strange situation, where it's just obvious that if the real goal only would be to establish autonomy, this and that, why are people living in refugee camps 30 years later? Like what's going on? The United Nations doesn't have enough money, or what's happening, so there's clearly something very strange going on there. Just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, super crazy. Yeah. Well, I'm glad this guy brings up Teilhard Chardin. I wonder if he hates him, though, because that's always how it goes. Okay, so we did that. We got through history, did Tubman, Western Sahara. Let's go to the
Right.
transition team. So
Before
first
we-
off, this is
before
great.
we-
Eddie posted this. Oh,
Yes. Just before we do that, maybe let's scroll up, because there's a relevant quote that
Okay.
I posted from my comments, which also belongs to the history thing, and I guess I want to read it on the very top.
Where is this? Oh, this guy here?
Yes.
This thing? Okay.
Yes, so I believe this is a comment from Lucifer the Harpist.
Come on, internet.
made some
Chill out.
Quite interesting comments on my channel, especially regarding Whittier, which is also some strange site with this Turnbull Canyon and harp and God knows what else. There's quite a few strange things going on there. So what I'd like to do is I'll just briefly read that quote to you guys, because I think it's interesting enough, and kind of let me know what you think of it, if there's any credence to this. Just zooming in here so I can read properly. So he's writing, yes, more context. And here, so I'm reading it out to you, so the comment actually, gets understood, hopefully, and discussed. in this obscure medium of YouTube comments, knowing my educated peers, which is you, chat, are actually reading. The, quote, Indian Wars continued in California officially up to the late 1870s. The Indian Wars was where the US government was paying the US military to kill the, quote, Indians. Men, women, and children. They were all slaughtered by the US military, and soldiers were paid $50 per head. This is official history. Unofficially, I'm saying, so this is the commentator on YouTube, these Indians were in fact Muslims. And it's entirely possible, according to my research, that the Indian Wars may have continued well into the 1880s and possibly the 1890s and beyond under the guise of oil mining. Because you see, with oil mining, the US government had the excuse to go up into the hills and destroy the land, hunting for perfect places to set up oil mining camps, killing their way into possible Muslim encampments of survivors of the Indian Wars, and wipe them out completely, and extract natural resources to further fuel the Indian Wars, which was a complete and utter genocide officially admitted by the US government. If that's what they're willing to admit, imagine what they're hiding. They are not admitting that the oil mining operations were secret military operations, but that's what I'm saying is entirely possible given what we know. The city of Whittier was an oil town, and before that it was obviously a Muslim town. So why is saying that? In another comment, he's mentioning that there is a castle there. He asked an old guy who seemed to know everything, what's happening with the castle, why did they demolish it? And that guy had told him, quote unquote, the Moors were here, and that they had built the castle, or the castle was there. Then some Templar guys came, they made a strange cornerstone ceremony, and a few years later tore it down. So that's why he's continuing with this speculation. So then he goes on, city of Whittier was an oil town, and before that, obviously a Muslim town. The Muslims could have easily escaped into the hills, and that could help explain the vast extent of oil mining in Whittier. They were chasing after the Muslims and making excuses to destroy the land and thoroughly pollute all the streams with oil to make the land uninhabitable and everyone who isn't paying for tap water, which they did in Whittier in 1893, acting like they're heroes for connecting Whittier to Los Angeles water grid after destroying all of Whittier's natural streams. I find that a quite interesting perspective. What do you say, Andreas?
There's definitely a lot of things there that are true. I'm not sure about the Muslim part per se. I'm not saying that it's impossible that by 1870 you had a connection, at least, or that we're talking about some different version of the word, of course. I do think that
let's just
if
say
you look
old
at
world
the Native
believers
American
and
Confederation,
non-Catholic, probably. Please go on.
Yeah. Well, ironically, though, that's funny too, because the word Catholic's supposed to mean Catholicos, which is universalist. So, okay, yeah, all right, I'll allow it. A Muslim, and that's funny too, because that's what my father. That's what my father would have said.
Oh, really? That's interesting. And in Germany or in Austria, you also say Moslem, like German pronunciation Moslem. Yeah, but also doesn't sound like a claim to supremacy at all if you're saying that you are the one universal church, right? And you are an institution that wields power. Doesn't sound strange at all, right? All right, I can add your screen to stage again, Andreas, or how do you want to continue? Next up, actually, we have the transition team. I can show it on my screen as well, as long as Andreas is maybe having slight connectivity issues. Here we go.
Let's try that again.
So here we are. This was posted by Eddie Lin on his super amazing private group. I hope it's okay that I'm, sharing this small excerpt from it. He's always posting great stuff, making very amazing connections. If you're on Facebook, you want to be friends with him, you want to join the group. If you're interested in synchромysticism, and numerology connections and all kinds of other things. I find this interesting, number one, because of course Prince Charles is the official king right now, and there's so many prophecies or scripts, however you want to see it, surrounding it. He's just pointing out that he's looking very similar to a historical figure. And what this reminded me of immediately is that there is also always the saying that in Austria, a famous politician by the name of Sebastian Kurz, who was the Austrian chancellor for a few years, looks very similar to a historical figure known as Otto of Bavaria. And yeah, that's just a curious thing. And then there's another comment here from someone saying, "Greetings from Poland. I've just found out that Prince Charles, now the king, was visiting Poland in 2010. He went to see the oldest Polish mosque, which is situated very near to the Belarus-Poland border. It means far from our capital. Why did he take such a long journey? We do not have many Muslims in Poland so far. This is weird." It may confirm in this particular case what David Jung Jr. is saying in the video, Palestine does not exist, because of course he's always bringing up these old world and Muslim connections. Yeah, I can't properly really make sense of it yet, but even if it's only that some of these families or lineages remember what has been there before, they may have all kinds of strange reasons why they would visit certain places, or yeah, further than that I can only speculate. Oh yeah, so this will be fun. I don't have to dwell on it too long, but let's see. So this is, yeah, here I don't think they're really saying anything relevant here, but I just think it's interesting. You can see, of course, how popular Trump was even long before he was in the political arena. People are familiar with this by now. I'm not sure if there is, any like deeper connection to this or to what they're saying here. Let's see if we have it on B-roll, because I think it's another tab. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like they're talking anything too. Yeah. All right. They talk about ice cream. God knows. Probably that's coding too. But yeah, it's kind of funny to see, especially maybe for a non-American who really doesn't know too much about American pop culture or politics, and then see like these older videos of Trump, of which there are plenty because he's been in the public sphere ever since, right? So ever since he left his Jesuit.
This is a British.
It's a British show, probably, yeah? Or what do you mean?
Yeah, Ali G, the Ali G show. Ali G's show was a British show. I mean, it aired in Britain, not in America.
Right.
I think at some point they probably showed it in America. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, someone says that's the fake Trump. I don't know. How do you tell the difference? All right. Then, really? At the end of the Ali G interview, he mentions Diddy. Seriously?
Interesting. Ice Cream and Diddy in the same interview? Well, come on. Yeah, I thought it was weird when I was a kid, and it was like during the presidential election, I remember tying it together that Puff Daddy changed his name to P. Diddy. Like I remember the recount was going on. People were arguing whether Bush or Gore were president, and there was like a South Park about the recount in Florida, and Puff Daddy and J-Lo were walking around on TV, and they were saying that Puff Daddy was changing his name to P. Diddy. That was before that. That was like a year before that.
One thing I briefly want to mention, I also picked up from the Gladio series, which is that one of the reasons why pizza places may be so important is because they may actually be used basically for drug running and depositing money and stuff like that. and then also, potentially depositing all
course.
kinds of goods, and those
Yeah, like
goods
the
may
French
not
Connection
only be
with heroin.
whatever
Yeah,
powder or other things.
heroin in tomato sauce cans is the old French Connection thing. So that was what the mob were doing in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, but into the 80s. It was completely when the French. I don't know if you've heard of the French Connection, but when they shut down the supposed French Connection, there was such a loss of that was so much of the heroin market in the United States that people were getting hugely sick because there's so many people in the United States that were secretly, working as a waitress or as a nurse or as a librarian or as a kindergarten teacher or as a junior high teacher, right? Who maybe they slipped and fell cleaning the snow and ice off of their driveway 15 years ago, were prescribed pills and then left on those pills until they couldn't afford the pills anymore. And they got addicted to heroin, which was being sold, like we just said, through the pizza places because they were the ones that could go all across the country bringing these metal cans, which would be tomato sauce imported or exported from here, from there in these giant jars, right? And yeah, that's
Makes sense.
into the 1990s. And when you see like these movies about informants, like the Tough Guys, the Goodfellas, the Ray Liotta one, the Untouchables, right? That the U.S. government, at the behest of the big pharma, infiltrates what's left of the American mob and kind of just dismantles and replaces it, right?
Right, that's how it makes sense. Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly mention this comment. So here he's saying the guy next to him is a Zionist. Well, I'm a little bit confused. Who are you talking about? Mic drop. No.
Which one? Yeah, that's, oh my God. Are you kidding me? Don't do this here right now.
Okay.
Oh, well, all right. Have you heard of the Krimchaks? Have you heard of the Krimchaks?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Just up for a second earlier, sort of, when you were talking about the not Ewing Jr. talking about not Palestine essentially, and so this is like one of my contingencies against everything being like Islam. I think that Islam is just one of the words we're latching onto that was used by this greater. Have you here? We're talking about the Krimchaks, and I was trying to lead into it by saying that everything's about Tartaria, because of course, why wouldn't I? So the Krimchaks, region of Jewish ethno-religious communities of Crimea, deriving from the Turkic speaking adherents of this rabbinical Judaism, right? So there's like kind of a Russo, and when I say Rus, I mean Rus, redheaded Ashkenazi Georgian people, hyper intelligent, hyper cool, nice people, really, and oppressed, you could say, by the Soviet Union, kulaked and controlled, and driven all over the place. Very similar to what you've heard from some of our conversations, like with the Tatarstanis talking what happened in Kazan. Same kind of thing happened in the Ukraine. Bigger, bolder, worse in some respects, because the Ukraine was such an important place. It's something that kind of bugs people, is that even for the Moscovians, they think of the Ukraine as this historical center. And if we look at the Byzantine or we look at Turkey and all these things, a place as important as Constantinople or Istanbul would have been whatever you want to call this Crimean Tatar region that so many of these families seem to come from, right? That's the reason it's kind of interesting, I think, the Krimchaks. Yeah, and this is their color scheme, and there's their logo, right?
All right.
One of them. Yeah, and yeah, here's the flag. There you go. I don't know, just blue and yellow with those red stripes. Something about it. Well, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Back to
I
the
just briefly
Zionism
want to
you're saying,
mention
but-
with this yeah, with the Ukraine thing, just very briefly, it's of course, how can I know what's really true? But it's one of these great examples again, where you could say on the one hand, both, oh, Ukraine has been more or less united with Russia or that region since 1910, whenever then Russia actually conquered everything. As I always like to mention, even Dugin confirms that Russia, didn't exist in its current form for thousands of years or anything like that. Not even he is claiming that. Um, uh, but then you would have now maybe Ukrainian nationalists
Yeah,
or
no, like
whatever.
official history.
Oh, you muted yourself. Or okay, I'll just finish the thought. So,
Sorry.
but then again, where whatever is actually true, you can then make good arguments both for saying, oh, Ukraine has always been the same with Russia, and why making a fuss about it? Or you could say, no, Ukraine actually is the homeland and is the real original thing and should be independent because it's much older or something. But in the end result, it's just any narrative just then gives credence for both of them to clash, or potential energy. And that's then the end result, whatever is really true in the end. And most likely, as it seems by now, most everyone in some way, shape, or form has been maligned, abused, and trafficked or whatever. So but yeah, it's good that you point that out. And there is definitely something there. I mean, the Crimean Tatars, as you're just showing, they are a thing or a known idea. And they also show up, I think, in these Soviet era documents, this secret service documents, which are always thrown around on Tartarian pop culture, let's say. So yeah. Anyhow, good that you bring it
they
up.
use,
Okay.
so it's also interesting that they use an apostrophe instead of the R, so the Tatars instead of the Tartars, right? So the Tatar means that they're using the more Persian. The Persians don't pronounce the R; they use an apostrophe kind of sound like that. So it's interesting in another level that it's a more Turanian or Iranian, Indo-Iranian connection to an otherwise isolated group. Not everyone gets an autonomous oblast. Yeah, well said. Have I seen
This one you
JAO
definitely
flag?
you definitely want to look at, because there's
No.
an autonomous region. There's also some like recent YouTube
Oh
videos
yeah,
about
yeah.
it, but I don't know about
Yeah.
the
I
logo. I just know that no one lives
I
there
should look
anymore.
into it way.
Or no
I should look
Jews live
into it
there
way
anymore.
deeper because
Oh no, what?
I always
Oh
thought about this on my
damn.
yeah. I always thought about this group all my life because Israel. Just another one like a knockoff. I mean, how cool! I always like knockoffs. So the idea of having your own Israel, like how cool is that? Like Russia would have a knockoff car, a knockoff record, a knockoff cartoon, a knockoff Israel. Like everything, knock it all off, right? That's crazy. But there's something probably more to it. Wow, the flag being this rainbow.
That's
Micmacs
crazy.
were called Tarantine. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna have to do some more digging into the Micmacs again because there's definitely a reason for this. But yeah, what do you think of this? A white flag with a rainbow across it. What could that possibly mean to the Jewish people? Crazy.
No, wait, technically, and this is again just one of these memes I recently saw, where you have like a menorah, that's what it's called, right? The seven candelabra, or however you call it. And that this could,
Yeah.
it's maybe obvious or not, but could relate to the seven chakras
It's like
or
your
the energy
Advent. It's
centers
like your Advent.
of the, yeah. So that
Yeah.
it could relate to the energy centers of the human body. If we just see it like that, then yeah, sure. Otherwise, first thing that comes to my mind now out of the blue is a full spectrum dominance. I don't know. Or full spectrum sovereignty, if the white is
Yeah,
for
there's
sovereignty,
definitely the idea that the menorah is the wife of God, the wisdom, the chokmah, and the family. So it's the family tree, and there's this whole thing there, the Elon, right? The Elon of the Hebrew Kabbalah. So it's the hidden symbol for God's family, and that God is a family and not just the father. That's a major part of it. But the Germans, as far as I can tell, I don't know if you guys in Austria, I assume, are obsessed with Advent the same, because here, everywhere I go, I see Germans lighting candles for the week, and it seems pretty Jewish if you don't know any better.
Advent,
In America,
Advent,
we don't do
ein
Advent
Lichtlein
nearly as
brennt.
much.
Yes, and they make you sing about it in
I've seen
school
people
and
eat
everything.
chocolates in America for Advent, but it's taken more seriously here than I've seen in America, which seems pretty close to the Hanukkah tradition in the way that they're presenting it too.
I honestly don't know the Hanukkah tradition. I mean, here I'll just briefly recount it. What you get is you get like I don't even know which, if there's a particular type of wood that is being used. How do you even call these things? Like how they tie the branches together? What's that called?
Oh, a wreath? Or yeah.
Yes, a wreath, but it's like a wreath not for your head, but like to put on the table. And you have 4 candles, and then you're
Mhm.
supposed to light 1 candle each Sunday in December before Christmas. So, and on I believe on the 4th, it's already Christmas. All right, or no, it's the 4th Sunday, and then after that is Christmas, basically. And yeah, maybe recount the Hanukkah tradition. All I can think of other than that is, of course, it's good business, because even in the city, everyone goes to buy the wreaths, and then later they go to buy the trees, right? Which usually are chopped and then, they're just burnt and thrown away, which is a huge waste, of course. Some people trying to change that a bit by now, luckily. Not everyone having dead trees for no reason. But yeah, you have these wreaths, so it's a good business. The other thing I can think of is always, I mean, I guess everywhere in the West, in a different way, you could see it as the increase of tension, let's say, but also of economic activity, but also potentially tension within the family. Of course, in families that get along, it can be a very nice event. And I'm lucky that I can say that for me, it's been that mostly. But for many individuals, of course, maybe they're alone, maybe they have issues with their family or something. It's usually where all kind of problems that people try to avoid the entire year then come to a head. Yeah. So I guess there can be different connotations to that practice overall, if you catch my drift. But yeah, please recount the Hanukkah idea so I have a clue, because I have no idea what they do.
Oh, it's like you're in your car and you're out of gas. You're at the E line, but then you pray like, "Can I just get there? Can I just get there?" And you just keep driving for 8 more days. It's like we didn't run out of oil. That's the remembrance. Wasn't that so great that we didn't run out of gas? We should celebrate that. I think every year what we'll do is for 8 days, we'll light a candle and remember how we were able to make it on that low tank of gas. That's kind of the point of Hanukkah. I mean, more or less, because it's the idea that you didn't run out of oil when you were sieged, and while you were sieged, you were able to keep the temple candles going, right? You keep it all working without any more oil, because God blessed the temple to keep the light going, so the fire didn't go out. Which is again probably from a Zoroastrian ritual, even going back, that they even had to keep the fire going, but. So they probably got that out of
David
out
Hume
of
Jr., of
Israel
course,
in Iran,
is potentially throwing the Zoroastrians under the bus as well. But anyways, there are whatever old origin stories that this is based on. I briefly want to mention this. Have you already become, of course, you're familiar with the German culture of Krampus and Nikolaus?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's fun to like try to make everything about the antithesis of what it is, but I don't think that the tractate that is the Quran, written by a singular guy who has been throughout his life, not just a philosopher or something, but an emperor, really, and a warlord, and someone who's a general, so he has to have control over all of these things, has anything more than just the directed focus that we see in the Quran. So it's different than something like a collection of all of these different beliefs from multiple different people that are synthesized together that give you different voices. You've got a singular voice that's supposed to be just one man. And so it makes it hard to just put everything on the idea of a more self organic reality where people have actually participated, submission to Islam. And I just don't think that that really makes as much sense. And we have to figure out at what point Islam becomes about that. Then, if it's only in the last few centuries that Islam becomes specifically this fascistic,
Of course,
didactic religion,
we
but that's
have
something
the
that
issue with labeling, obviously, yeah, that we don't have enough words for it even. And also the idea that, and of course I'm blaspheming here even more, but that was necessarily written by a single individual, I would call everything into question, yeah. And even David Ewing Jr. says how far back he can trace it is about 1 or maybe 200 years, no, definitely not more than 300 years orally is how he can trace it back. And for the written record, it's even much more flimsy. So I'd say there's 100 million open questions here just as well. And that's with the Quran only. And then, of course, what was the practice of Islam before that? How similar maybe were many of the old world religion practices, which is actually what I tend to believe, that they were all kind of similar, or many of them, and then only in retrospect were made appear to be so vastly different from each other, only to make sure that whoever is crazy enough, they can continue to play command and conquer. Because if everyone in the world would remember, okay, maybe I use this type of symbol more,
Right.
maybe you use this type of symbol more, but our basic practice and understanding actually is perfectly the same, which mainly is we don't accept taxation and interest, which is both in the Bible and the Quran, and I don't know where else, yeah. And we don't accept any worldly authority, and we will not put material gain over spiritual value and basic compassion, not to say humanity, which is the humanist route, right? But so that's kind of my feeling about this.
Hey,
But
look, Obi-Wan has
hopefully
entered the
we'll be able
chat.
to find out more. Obi-Wan?
Maybe the force be with the monkey.
Oh, very
Exciting
good.
stuff. Hola, gentlemen. Well, we were talking about you earlier, sweetheart. You should probably rewind back and see where you were mentioned. But I was going to bring up Steiner because of all that, because I think it's different. I see it more like we have these yuga cycles or whatever it is, and maybe it's a bit theosophic, but that we have Steiner said there was an Akashic memory and this sort of way that people used to exist before Havelock, and even Havelock talks about this, the idea that Greek myth and story, they give us new ways of communicating, which rewire our brain to some extent. And Steiner talked about it like we had a telepathic, the way the Taoists and the Buddhists say it, we have a telepathic primordial existence where humanity was in touch with nature, which humanity could communicate with animals and understand trees, all of that kind of thing. But that emerged some small select group of people that started communicating with language the way we use symbolic language, really. And that was something that, because everyone was so telepathic, once they were impressionable to any degree, that spread like wildfire, and it meant that they could control those people.
Idolatry.
Because a lot of people weren't yet, self-realized individuals, so they still felt the ideas as ideas from God instead of from themselves. So that's why you said the 7 chakra points instead of the 7 members of some sort of Godhead family, because there's just such a, I think especially in Europe after Nietzsche, there's a realization of not just anthropic perspective, but looking through the self at reality, modeling through the self, like the political body, right? Everything becomes part of how you see the holistic. And if there's a holistic, it's something that you can reflect, the macrocosm to the microcosm. And I think that's what's broken. That's what ends up being replaced by modern religion just generally. And you look at Iran as the big example, because you could also look at India, but both places, you have North India and you have in Iran the spreading of guru cultures that are worshiping these kind of Ubermenschen gurus. And then you've got these pharaohic or whatever kind of kings that even the Zoroastrians are respecting, like this idea of someone that's ahead of the game that they're going to eventually evolve into. And maybe it takes like a few hundred years or something, but people do catch up. At a certain point, it's maybe the death of the psychic, though, because you end up replacing that technology and people aren't learning it anymore because they're so busy trying to learn how to record symbols or interpret symbols on such a level that they could be stored and given from one lifetime to another lifetime. That dead information can be looked at and printed and recorded. That becomes kind of the controversial end. But then you have manifestation. You have all of these people that are really good at being themselves until, and this looks like kind of today almost, in Europe,
Just
you have
on a side note before you go on, and I don't want to interrupt you too much,
tolerant.
but just very briefly, and we have an incredible ping. So I just want to bring out or ask the question, to what extent could the increase in usage of recordings, so whether it's any type of scripture or even now digital technology, be correlating with an actual downfall of humanity's potential, humanity's lifespan, or humanity's ability to properly educate the next generation, so it becomes even necessary to start recording information in this dead manner rather than in the living manner, which how it would probably be best transferred actually. That's just an aside, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question because I think society looks very different because of recording in dead technology. And maybe we would be better off in some ways. I don't know if you have to make a choice. It seems unfair that you'd have to make a choice. It seems like you should be able to spend time doing both. You know, a kid should be able to do both and learn how to follow eagles and swim and fly and also use technology. I feel like I got really lucky maybe because I grew up in Santa Cruz and was outside a lot also. But no, I don't think you have to make a pure choice. I do think that there are efforts being made to keep you from learning how to use your natural senses, your psychic senses, or whatever that means. And again,
Well, that
that's
seems
also where
obvious,
this is
yes.
going. So you get to a
Even just
point
in terms
where
of
you have,
trapping children in the classroom
yeah,
for 10 years, right?
like when Europeans were more interested than they are now in talking about Persia and Babylon and Siddhartha in India, right, and all those things, and Egyptian magic, was during the Mozart period. That's the kind of Freemasonic Illuminati time that Europe was doing really well. And a lot of guys were able to learn what they wanted to learn about. And they were interested in becoming more bigger, cooler guys that knew better things than they knew before, right? And they were like looking into what people, a membership from Post. Somebody take that. Thank you, Post. Rare, exotic information so that they could learn based. Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday, dude. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, for his birthday, someone else gets a membership. So sweet. Okay, but imagine that you get to a point where you're importing all sorts of information because you can just afford to. What is this like? This is like ancient Babylon. In ancient Persia, they were like this. There's a point when they're importing information from all over the world and they're creating an empire that is eclectic and anyone can learn whatever they want to learn because they're so powerful that information isn't even something that harms them. It only helps them more. But Iran eventually imports Islam. I mean, at least from the way that history is presented, Islam is a violent, I mean, from the Quran and what you read, it's a violent, didactic religion that destroyed women's rights and freedom. Imported. Yeah.
Are you sure it was imported
because
and
it seems
was
like a
not
Semitic,
exported to them?
It's Semitic, the same way that Iran was not Semitic but Iranian. It was Aryan, like Indo-Aryan in the literal sense. So this is where Jews and Arabs were imported into a region, but they were not originally. It's not originally that they're imported, and in the importation you have all sorts of cultural fusion and mixing and all sorts of cool things. But at the time you're looking at Baalbek and these places having women administering government, right? So this is like now in a lot of ways. It's pretty impressive in a lot of ways. I think it's kind of cool that we have women in government. I'm actually kind of a fan of it. So that they did have this, and that this is something that ends because they import an intolerant military order of radicals is concerning and reminds me of things going on in Europe today. That's kind of my concern. You can import, by being so open-minded, something that is a radical, closed-minded, maybe you could say better, directed thought. And I think you have to be very careful with it, right? And there's ways that Islam can be used for positivity, and of course, there's lots of talks about female rights that are not being listened to. But you look at ancient Iran, the way it's presented as something before Islam, and that's the RGZ. What's up, Mark? What's up, Mac? RGZ. Dude, we got like 5 new members right there. Hey, and Diana. Dude. I don't know, just some semantic rants, sorry.
Boom. Thank you so much for the gifts. Yes, thank you, Andreas, for outlining that. All I will say is, yeah, just as you said at the end, this is how it is being presented. To me, there's still too many open questions there, and now I'm in a full screen suddenly. Yeah, for me, this is not settled at all yet. But anyways, it has to be investigated. And again, I'll just point out the main basic issue. We don't have enough terms. It's very difficult, just as if I would say Christian today, or 50 or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago. Same with Muslim, same with Jewish. It could mean drastically different things. And that's usually the basic issue. And of course, within any religion, obviously, you have different alignments. You have crazy individuals everywhere. That also has to be accounted for. And then you have all these psyops added on top. It gets muddy. But maybe over time we can figure something out. So I can bring up the next thing, which is The Apprentice. This is a movie. I haven't seen it yet. I should actually see how I can get to see this. I just released. Which is interesting because it actually talks about his relationship with attorney Roy Cohen. And I guess I just picked this up in some kind of chat somewhere. So I thought I'll add it to the list because that's, of course, interesting. Here, I'll just go over this briefly. This is one of the researchers I continuously recommend. I think one of the most interesting guys in a German-speaking region. Trust no celebrity, trau keinem Promi. He has got videos on all kinds of different topics. Let me actually take a look right here. Let's see, making me in this. He's got quite a few things on Trump. Again, this is only his most recent channel, which is why there's not too much here. But anyone who wants to see like a, how should I say, a German conspiracy research analyst, who I would say is, from what exists in German, definitely on the top tier. You know, you can agree, you don't have to agree with anything he says, but he's definitely raising relevant questions. And what he's also saying quite a few times, which I find very interesting, is in his mind, at least, there is actually a convalescence also between, as you can see here on the top right, certain types of, however you would call it, Orthodox or Lubavitch or whatever connections that may potentially intertwine world stage actors that seem disconnected and may actually connect them in certain ways. Of course, he's differentiating, you know, but that's interesting, and especially because he's also claiming that quite a few narratives related, for example, to the current conflict with NATO and Ukraine, where some people speak of, you know, biolabs and people speak of NATO surrounding Russia and all of that. He's saying, and I didn't research this in detail, but he's saying these things actually were tropes that already were used 100 years ago. So the idea of encirclement and quite a few other things. And he's claiming many of those, let's say, tropes that maybe are picked up by somebody researching something in the West, trying to be critical, may actually just be literally Russian propaganda pieces. So not in the way that maybe Hillary Clinton would have talked about it, but that still there are connections. You know, of course, I cannot verify it, but it's very interesting to listen to a viewpoint that may be different from your own, or that may present yet another angle on the topic, right? So here, basically, he's asking the questions now, the guys that Trump has put into office. What are they really going to do? And is this really going to be for peace or not? So we're going to translate this to English so at least people can read along. English. Yes. So yeah, he's talking about Chabad Lubavitch here. Says the happy-go-lucky Jewish group that connects Trump and Putin. So here, apparently, there's also at least some type of mainstream reporting on this, which may be something worth looking into. Rogan is even involved here. So he has also some overview, of course, of American media. Tilman Knechtel, who runs this channel, Trust No Celebrity, I guess is one of the few guys in the German-speaking area who also really speaks English well and is actually looking at these things and understands them, because many too often times there is still a language barrier and people get confused only because they can't properly translate or understand something. Where I'd also like to point out, I put this, I think, on the very bottom of the links. We don't have to go through it. But apparently there's a new feature in YouTube now, which is what I talked about a few weeks ago, where I said, oh, maybe in a year they will have automatic dubs in different languages. And apparently for some users of YouTube, this has already been enabled, where people are complaining that they're starting a video and it's like translating to English or German, but it's not what they wanted and the quality is quite bad, whatever this means. I didn't listen to a sample of it yet, but apparently this feature already is being beta tested by YouTube. So maybe in the future, this will save us some effort, especially then, you know, a few months later, when they decide to switch to the proper AI model, it will also sound decent. So yeah, anyhow, once the critical analysis of Trump's guys from a German can take a look here. Then this one. So yeah, beware, this is called All the President's Men. This is by Mr. E, who has done a great series on the first ladies of the United States on this channel. He's also now on YouTube again, but the main series certainly is available on Odyssey. And he's basically doing, you know, what is commonly called transvestigation. Again, everyone, please make up your own mind. But yeah, what can I tell you? You know, anytime watching these videos, I'm like, how can it be so many individuals here and there, all of them? I mean, it's kind of, you know, it seems so impossible. But then at the same time, I have to say that, as I mentioned before, for a long time, I've been wondering, especially in certain series and movies and so on, there are certain types of females that have very particular look, seem to have very particular builds. And even though there are advanced techniques for changing gender very early in terms of phenotype, as I understand, oftentimes you still can have some correlations, which may hint, again, I wouldn't mind, anyone can do whatever they want, but I think it is an issue if it's being used politically, again, to mislabel oneself and then basically deceive people, to put it mildly. And then here, I had sent this to David Charles Plate because I saw some Facebook post that he did some kind of talk or something related to RFK. So here I just wanted to point this out from the series, which is like a 10-part series. And here he's talking about the Kennedys. And oh, there's Schwarzenegger too. Oh my God. And yeah, everyone can make up their own mind as to what they think is going on here. But I think anyone seriously interested in the world stage should at the very least take a look at it. Here also, yeah, questioning the narrative here. I mean, yeah, make up your own mind. Then here, this is an example. I randomly came across this just as I was researching this. I was literally walking past the TV and then they were talking about this and I was like, Serena Williams, I heard that name before. What's going on here? Then I remembered, oh, famous tennis star, this and that. Of course, I guess in chat, most people will know they were like on super top of every list. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. This is by a channel or by a network literally called Trans World Sport. Here officially interviewing Venus and Serena Williams already at 11. So, however could they know that later they would become so famous or whatever? They already made an interview with them. What's very curious here then is they say in mainstream media, New York Post, trans extremists refuse to face facts. Men are stronger than women. And how is this being exemplified? This is being exemplified by the fact that Serena Williams, presented as a female, got trounced along with her very talented sister Venus by a 50-year-old man ranked 203rd worldwide in 1998. So she officially presented female is being used along with her presented sister to prove that do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
This is kind of insane.
This is insane. I like how they have the flag as the Masonic apron set.
Yeah, it's properly set up here. And then also, I was surprised to find this, but it does exist on YouTube. Anyone who wants to get into this and look at some of the evidence and ideas. And also, I have to say, the very suspicious backstory of their father. Once again, need to look at the parents. What may be going on here. This video still exists on YouTube, which is pretty cool. So everyone can just check it out. And it even relates to Michelle Obama as well, because apparently they are even hanging out together or something like that. So yeah, anyhow, this is just like a pop culture example. But if it's true, of course, it's crazy, because think of it. Now people are making a fuss of it. And in the early 2000s, they already were #1 in the world, So you see what I'm saying?
My God. And they're probably Raelians.
Yeah, they're like Cardassians or something, or how is it called? And yeah, Raelians, of course, too. Yeah, the UFO sect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So last thing here is this incredibly amazing channel where I hope really everyone subscribes, takes a good look, and starts, commenting and sharing more about it. Here it's about the idea of cocoons and transformations, and also often, of course, about Mandela effects and different ideas. But yeah, pretty crazy from how many different videos he's pulling together the tropes and showing how they all tell you the same story. Pretty cool. And I think all of his videos are amazing. Some of them go over my head, or they're too synchronistic for me to understand, or I don't know enough of the references. But he's making it easy enough to glean the basic idea, with the captions he's putting there. And then he's just showing all of these examples. Oh yeah, and then also at the end, showing some Mandela effect examples, which is also crazy. Even here, this idea, having the two pillars turn into one pillar, which is the whole thing, of course, with the World Trade Center, which today is one pillar. Before it was two pillars. Some people speculate if that was always the plan. Let's see, we have something else here that's interesting. I mean, everything here is interesting. The only question is if I can quickly grab it and make sense of it. Oh yeah, and here also. What's the lyrics here? I would have done it wrong. What would you say? What is the lyric? I mean, here it says it, but here I would have said what a difference a day makes. Oh yeah, and also here, we are not the same people. I never watched this Breaking Bad or whatever this is, this kind of guy. But apparently there's a super popular meme, and the guy never even said it. And this one I would have guessed wrong. Difference a day makes. I would also have said makes. I also am not sure about this apostrophe here, or however you call it, hyphen. And now it's supposed to be what a difference a day made. So that's only the second part of the video. The first synchronistic part with all the movie examples is even kind of independent of it, and more explains the general idea that's presented, or what they want to relay. And here at the end, you have these Mandela effects. Pretty insane stuff, I think, but very cool, very well edited. and I really want to see him, with 10 or 100x subscribers and views. All right. That's it for that section. Anything you want to comment, Andreas?
No, it looks good though. I'm interested in Easturia. Let's do that. Ustaria.
Okay, so here, what we have here, this is kind of, I'm not sure if you can say it's funny or not. This is an interview. This guy has been regularly organizing demonstrations in Austria also during the lockdown period. He honestly, to me, seems like a real grassroots guy. There was even an example when some German people came over and kind of tried to take over the demonstrations. And then this guy, along with some other Austrians, said, okay, don't worry, we don't need to be part of the German Federation. They were called Querdenker back then. So to think laterally, which in olden times was a positive thing. And then during the lockdowns, they made it equal with, nutcase, right? Or crazy individual. So this guy really seems to be grassroots guy, which is cool because they basically then split off their own organization and said, okay, before some crazy German or Swiss guys, which kind of seems strange, want to take over our agenda, which is going to make our own thing. So anyhow, this guy seems to be legit, and he's talking with him and just explaining what happened this weekend in Vienna. There was a demonstration, but first, this demonstration was actually banned, which generally the right to assembly is quite important, right? And quite relevant. And usually there's demonstrations like every other week, also blocking the inner city or blocking one of the main roads. And that's a usual thing, actually. But this time they said, oh no. First, actually, they said, because they wanted to do it, I think a month prior or 2-3 weeks prior, there was like a bigger demonstration. Why? Because, as I mentioned in the previous show, I'll maybe show some B-roll in the meantime, yeah. On a previous show, I mentioned that in the current elections, the Freedom Party got the most votes, but the president and all the other parties kind of make sure that they will not get into the government, even though they have the most votes, right? And any politics aside, but that's the game they're playing. And so you have people coming out to demonstrate for many different reasons, for peace and so on, but also, of course, people are upset because they're saying, well, we're playing democracy here, right? So at the very least, the party that's officially even gets the strongest election result should be the first ones to be given the chance to form a coalition government, instead of just being kind of overruled by the president and conspiratorially excluded by the other parties. That's at least how it's being presented in the public media and from anything that I can glean. So you have people going on the street, but the first time they said they want to go, which was about 2 weeks ago, some officials came out of the woodworks and said, oh no, don't do it, because this is the annual date of some kind of pogroms during the German Nazi era, right? Which was I guess it was even the 9th November or even or 4th November or something like this. So they said, oh, because it's on that date, you really shouldn't go out to demonstrate on that day. Few days later, because they said, okay, we really didn't think of it and that really wasn't our intention. We just chose it because it was a Saturday or something. And we know on a Saturday, of course, people can come out, to voice their opinion and join a demonstration. But they backpedaled and said, okay, of course, we don't want to upset anyone. We're just going to reschedule it, right? Few days later, some people looked into the calendar and realized that historically there have been leftist demonstrations, let's say, on exactly that date, and nobody was raising an eyebrow, 20 years ago or something. So obviously super hypocritical. So then they said, okay, we're going to reschedule. And now I believe it was either this exact demonstration or at least related in terms of general sentiment, reschedule it to this Saturday. And the government or the chancellor simply said, no, I'm very sorry, you're not allowed to demonstrate because the economy is so weak and so on. It's bad for the Vienna economy or something. We're just going to ban you from demonstrating on that Saturday and going along the usual route, which is along the ring, right? And then in the end, what happened? Still many people showed up. I believe maybe there were a few demonstrations that still were then legal or not or whatever, but you had at least several thousand people showing up. In the newspapers, they said it was only 1,000, which I think is most likely not correct at all. And then they did everything they could, and you even have reporting from this from a bit more independent channels, where you have live from the scene or just social media, a quite well-known doctor being inside the demonstration and saying, oh, it's very interesting, I just wanted to leave to go to a concert, and they were kind of maybe inside here or somewhere else, as you can see here on the screen, like some area which is met with buildings. So you have a clearly enclosed area through these gates, and I can't say whether it was here exactly, but some place similar to this, where suddenly the police decided to block off all the entrances and then played all kind of games. So first disallowed people for hours to leave, even when they said, I'm sorry, I have to go to the toilet or whatever. They're like, no, you can't. And then even tried to play a game with them, often later saying, oh, now you can leave if you give us your ID. But because you stayed when you weren't allowed to demonstrate, we're going to fine you for that. And all, just like complete BS, pseudo regulation, most likely illegal volition ideas, most likely due to order from up high. And why am I talking about this so much is because this is the fancy, free, and amazing Austria in Vienna, where even overall you could say it's not a lockdown right now. People are not going crazy or whatever. It's just a, strange political situation. But in the end, no one from the demonstration got violent, even though they were held there, literally. Some people said it should be said that they were imprisoned there. One can argue about the definition of that. But yeah, I'm just talking about this because, again, this is in the middle of Europe. This is so wealthy and amazing Austria, and no one got hurt, luckily. But the media reports only 1,000 people were there, and then even tries to construe something because unrelated to the demonstrations, someone somewhere in the city threw off the kippah of a Jewish guy. And then they made headlines and tried to make it appear as if the demonstrations were violent or anti-Semitic, stuff like that, which again is so blatantly obvious hypocrisy that I'm again really wondering what the real end game is. Like, do they want to have people completely lose trust in all media and government, or what's the point here? Because again, it's so blatantly obvious that they're lying. And so easily proven that anyone who is not sitting on the other side of the country or is completely boxed into whatever state propaganda ideology can so clearly see that there are these, blatant double standards and hypocrisy, which is absurd. I'm not sure what else to say. Yeah, that was my rant about
Crazy. Wow. No, I feel you though.
So yeah, even here, I think you can tell there's more than 1,000 people overall. So yeah. Please go on.
Me. It's crazy.
Yeah, and here it even explains in the description, so anyone who's curious, here it talks about the 5 gates, only one was open, and then the police made all kind of jokes. So it was actually maybe even this area that's being shown here. It's complete joke. And what you have all these, regular people there with color flags or whatever, and then they get portrayed as the people who are against democracy or whatever, or who are violent or stuff like this. And it was the very same strategy during the lockdowns. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, luckily by now we have social media and independent reporting, so everyone can make up their own mind as to what actually happened at these events, which then get reported so strangely in the media. Anything you want to comment? Andreas? Are you stuck? Can you hear me? Oh, Andreas will be rejoining us. Oh, and here, just again from the demonstration, another interesting thing, especially to all our Western allies. So Austria is not officially in NATO, although we are within the so-called Partnership for Peace. Sky Shield is supposed to be a weapon system to be installed also in Austria. I'm not sure how much of a topic this is in America, how many people talk about it. Here it's a big deal because at least officially and according to the constitution, Austria still should be a neutral country. However, all of the parties, except the one which recently got the most votes, which is the Freedom Party, which is getting shunned, as I explained, all the other parties are more or less, well, not all of them, but let's say rather more than not, are for installing this very interesting type of defense mechanism, which also then potentially, if we believe in geopolitics, raises further questions and issues, because as soon as we have some type of weapon system that is being used by NATO, it of course begs the question whether Austria could still be claimed to be a neutral country or not. So people are understandably here demonstrating against installing weapon system in Austria if we want to be a neutral country. So I'll just go on with this section. We'll see if Andreas rejoins. But these things I can explain. So a bit more from Austria. This is actually a German guy. He does some quite interesting commentary, even getting into conspiracies recently. Here I just basically wanted to point out that this is the very first, they call him a politician. He doesn't really have an office yet, but he's basically trying to coup the Social Democrat Party in Austria. And what is interesting is he is the very first guy, at least a political office aspirant, and by now he has pretty good chances and gets a lot of media coverage, who officially was excusing himself for the statements he made during the lockdown period in relation to those who maybe were not happy about a mandate or about the lockdowns. And that's, of course, pretty amazing for the general discourse. Anyone in chat, if you know if in your country, did any of the politicians or that get a lot of media coverage and have any sort of political affiliation or power already did say that maybe they're sorry or anything like that? Not saying that I'm trusting this guy at all or anything like this, but it is very interesting that this idea has entered the discourse, that somebody would actually consider that maybe something that they did during the lockdowns was not perfectly nice, was not very inclusive or friendly, or even very humanist for that matter. Here we have more footage from the demonstration. We've already shown some of that. And then there's some more ideas about China and some other things. But since it appears that Andreas may be stuck without internet now, I'm not perfectly sure. I'll maybe just cut this one short. Let's see, Andreas wrote something, but this was a link from earlier. And we'll just close it at the Historia section, and next time we'll continue. Let's see what else we got as a kind of a preview. Yeah, only some stuff for that goes beyond. So there is a few things from China. Of course, everyone kindly check out the links in the description if you want to see the show notes. I'm always very happy anyone visiting it, actually checking out the sources. You can make up your own mind, and then you can come back on YouTube and comment on whatever other sources and ideas you find. And here, the Beyond section, this is just some info this is from Divergent about UFOs or strange light phenomenon that are happening. There's quite a few of them. And of course, still the question, who or what are they exactly? What's going on here? Everyone can check that out. Corbett report, ozone layer. That was, of course, the environmental scare, I guess, about 30 or 40 years ago that most people forgot about. So that can be something interesting to check out. Corbett is maybe not on top of every conspiracy, but he's doing quite good analysis on many levels, I would say. And then to finish off, oh yeah, here actually something very cool presented by alien scientist who has also just been on before the show, Jeremy Riz, and he has something about Bob Lazar. So this is one of the guys who's kind of famous in the conspiracy realm talking about UFOs, and apparently this is a side debunking him. I'm not that deep into all of these conspiracies to be properly able to differentiate all of them, but certainly if you're interested in the UFO stuff, I think this is a cool site to check out, because we always need to separate real conspiracy from junk conspiracy, right? and then some more stuff. But I think that's good for now. I'll say thank you very much. I hope Andreas gets his internet back in time for the next show. I'd like to thank y'all and hope you have a wonderful day. And I want to find something that I can play as an outro. So we're just going to have some music. Thank you all very much.
Fire and brimstone burn as worlds turn. Bacteria, and we remember at the start of civilization fell. I still remember it. Welcome to Exeter. Welcome to Exeter. Welcome to Exeter. Welcome to Exeter. Tatars stands alone. Stolen by the Freemasons. Tatars stands alone. Fire and brimstone burn, seismic turmoil, Tataria. Land we remember at the start of civilization fell.